Bismarck Sea, March 3, 1943, 0600 hours. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura, commander of the Leh resupply convoy, stands on the bridge of his flagship. Before him, 8 destroyers escort 8 heavily loaded transport ships through waters the Japanese consider safely under their control. The convoy carries the 51st Division's reinforcements, 6,900 soldiers, promised to Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi at Leh. Kimura feels confident they'll reach their destination. For over a year, Japanese warships have crossed these waters without facing serious American opposition. What Kimura doesn't, what no Japanese naval officer could imagine, is that American mechanics in Australian workshops have turned medium bombers into lethal ship killers. Within 4 hours, modified B-25, Mitchells armed with 8 50 caliber machine guns mounted in their noses will transform these calm waters into a sea of burning wreckage. The Japanese Navy's confidence rests on past victories, from Pearl Harbor to the Java Sea, and the belief that high-altitude American bombers can't hit moving ships. Their destroyers' anti-aircraft guns, they think, can repel any low-flying aircraft reckless enough to come close. Captain Tamichihara of the destroyer Shigure has sailed these routes many times. He's seen American efforts fail. High-level bombing by B-17s that missed almost everything, torpedo runs that expose planes to deadly fire, and medium-altitude attacks easily dodged by maneuvering ships. The Imperial Navy has refined tactics to counter aerial assaults, swift evasive turns, coordinated anti-aircraft fire from multiple ships, and fighter cover from the 11th Air Fleet based at Rabaul. These methods have worked well enough that Admiral Gunichi Mikawa approved this convoy despite knowing it would be detected. Japanese commanders still see air combat as a fight between ships and horizontal or torpedo bombers, battles they believe can be won through discipline and precision fire. Commander Yasumi Doi aboard the destroyer Tokitsukaze has trained his gunners relentlessly, teaching them to focus their 25-meter cannons on incoming aircraft and maintain steady aim even under pressure. The convoy's defenses include more than 100 25mm guns, dozens of 13mm machine guns, and the destroyer's 5-inch dual-purpose weapons, forming what doctrine calls an umbrella of steel. This defense has proven reliable in previous engagements, reinforcing their faith that they can handle anything the Allies send. The transport ships carry more than troops. They hold ammunition, food, medical supplies and equipment vital for the Japanese garrison in New Guinea. The largest ship, Kembu Maru, displaces over 6,000 tons and carries an entire regiment. The soldiers, waiting at Rabaul for favorable weather, have been told they're entering a combat zone. Still, they trust the Navy's protection for the short voyage to Leh. The convoy moves in tight formation, destroyers guarding the transports, ready for submarines or aircraft. Their procedures, refined by 2 years of Pacific warfare, are routine, but March 3, 1943, will not be routine. When lookouts first spot American aircraft approaching from the south, Lieutenant Commander Ikada on the destroyer Asashio reports multiple contacts at medium altitude, standard formations of B-17s and B-25s flying at about 7,000 feet. The gunners prepare as usual, turning their weapons toward the sky and calculating range and deflection. They don't yet see what's coming below the radar. B-25 Mitchells flying just above the waves, modified in ways they can't imagine. These new strafer B-25s mark one of the Pacific War's most effective tactical changes. Created out of frustration with the failure of conventional bombing, Major Paul Pappy Gunn, a former Navy pilot turned Army Air Forces officer, has engineered a weapon that will soon change everything. It was soon realized that hitting moving ships from high altitude was nearly impossible, and torpedo attacks demanded specialized training and equipment the Army Air Forces lacked in the Southwest Pacific. Working with North American Aviation Field Representative Jack Fox at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane, Australia, Gunn began installing additional 50 caliber machine guns in the nose of B-25 bombers. The bombardier position was removed to create room, first for 4 guns, later expanded to 8. This required major reinforcement of the nose structure, more ammunition storage and careful weight balancing. All achieved through trial and error. The 50 caliber guns fired M8 armor-piercing incendiary rounds, a 619-grain projectile traveling at 2,010 feet per second. These rounds could pierce destroyer deck armor and ignite fires with their incendiary cores. Each gun fired about 850 rounds per minute, and when 8 fired together, they unleashed 6,800 rounds per minute. This destructive stream could tear through ship superstructures, wipe out anti-aircraft crews, and devastate targets before they could react. Survivors described the terrifying sight of a B-25's nose lighting up with muzzle flashes before armor-piercing rounds ripped through their ship's skip. Bombing tactics complemented these modifications perfectly. Major William Benn of the 43rd Bombardment Group had developed this method using B-17s, finding that bombs dropped from 200–250 feet could bounce across the water like stones and strike ships directly or detonate nearby. The method demanded precise timing and immense courage, as pilots had to fly straight and low toward enemy ships, easy targets for anti-aircraft guns. Yet the accuracy far exceeded that of high-altitude bombing. Pilots practiced relentlessly near Port Moresby, perfecting their aim on the wreck of the SS, Pruth until they could hit targets consistently. General George Kenney of the 5th Air Force saw the potential of pairing skip bombing with gunship conversions. He called these B-25s commerce destroyers, capable of crippling Japanese shipping. By March 1943, the 3rd Attack Group had fully adopted the strafer configuration. Major Edward L. Ed Larner of the 90th Bombardment Squadron led the development of new low-level attack tactics that maximized the power of the 8-gun nose. Standard procedure had B-25s approach from 1,000 to 2,500 feet, dropping to wave-top height 2 miles from the target, accelerating to full speed while aligning with the enemy ship. At about 1,500 yards, the pilot opened fire, unleashing streams of armor-piercing rounds while preparing to drop skip bombs. Admiral Kimura's first sign of trouble came when high-flying B-17s at 7,000 feet began their runs, drawing the attention of Japanese gunners. Destroyer crews followed training, filling the sky with 25 Mimikos and 5-inch fire. But this was exactly what the Americans wanted. As every Japanese gunner looked skyward, 13 Australian bow fighters and 12 B-25 strafers from the 3rd Attack Group came in low from the southwest, skimming just above the waves. Major Lana led the attack in his B-25 Ruthless, heading straight for the destroyer Shirayuki at 280 meters out. Japanese sailors stared in shock. They had seen B-25s before, but never with 8 guns in the nose, flying so low they could see faces on deck. At around to 200 yards, Lana opened fire. 8 streams of 50 caliber rounds tore through Shirayuki, smashing her bridge and superstructure. The thin gun shields offered no protection. Within seconds, her anti-aircraft positions went silent, their crews shredded by concentrated fire. Ensign Takashi Miura, one of few survivors, later said it felt like being trapped inside a giant metal saw as rounds ripped through. Steel and men alike, Lana fired for 8 seconds over 900 rounds before releasing 2 500-pound bombs that skipped into Shirayuki's hull and detonated after a short delay. The blasts broke the destroyer's back and flooded her engine rooms. As Lana pulled up, his gunner strafed the decks, leaving the ship listing heavily and doomed. Behind him, 11 more B-25s attacked other convoy ships. Lieutenant John Hennebury targeted the transport Kakusei Maru, sweeping his gunfire from bow to stern before his skip bombs tore open her hull. The ship's captain found his helm unresponsive. His bridge crew had been killed instantly. The bow fighters added to the chaos, their 20mm cannons and 303 machine guns tearing through gun crews and bridges. Flight Sergeant Fred Cassidy of No. 30 Squadron strafed the transport Teo Maru, watching her bridge disintegrate and sailors hurled into the air by explosions. Skip bombing proved devastating. Bombs bounced across the water, striking hulls and exploding below the surface. The transport Nojima took 3 direct hits, her hull ripped open, holds flooding instantly with trapped soldiers. Witnesses said their screams could be heard, even over the roar of engines and explosions. Commander Yasumi, Toy aboard Tokitsukaze, watched helplessly as his crews were slaughtered by the relentless 50 caliber fire. Attempts to organize resistance failed. Gunners were dying too fast to fight back. The Japanese Navy had never trained for such attacks. Medium bombers had become flying gunships, combining strafing and skip bombing at wave-top height, something no Japanese doctrine had anticipated. The destroyer Arashio tried to shield the transports, but became a prime target. 3 B-25s concentrated on her, pouring over 2,000 rounds per minute into her superstructure. Her bridge crew was wiped out, steering jammed, and she collided with the transport Nojima. Both ships burned uncontrollably, locked together as fire spread. From his flagship, Admiral Kimura watched his convoy being annihilated. The attack defied every expectation. The Americans weren't using torpedoes or dropping bombs from altitude. They were attacking head-on at point-blank range with heavy guns that turned ships into infernos. Kimura ordered evasive maneuvers, but the B-25s were too fast and came from every direction. Any ship that tried to maintain formation was cut apart. The transport Ogawa Maru became another victim when her captain mistakenly turned broadside to the attackers. Lieutenant Donald McCullough in sleepy time. Gal opened fire from 1,500 yards, his 8 guns riddling the hull with incendiary rounds that ignited fuel and ammunition. Skip bombs followed, breaking the ship in half and sending her down with most of her 1,500 soldiers trapped inside. In just 15 minutes, the convoy was destroyed. The destroyer Asagumo, attempting to rescue survivors, was also hit. Her decks swept by gunfire and skip bombs that ripped holes below the waterline. Even lifeboats and swimmers were strafed to prevent reinforcements from reaching New Guinea. By 10:15 a.m., as the last B-25s disappeared southward, Admiral Kimura faced a scene of devastation. All 8 transports were gone, burning oil marking their resting places beneath the sea. 4 destroyers were sunk, including his flagship Shirayuki. The survivors were crippled, their decks littered with dead and wounded, superstructures riddled with holes. Of the 6,900 troops who had departed Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 reached Leh, most rescued later by submarines. The 51st Division had been destroyed not in combat, but aboard transports turned into floating coffins by modified bombers. Captain Tamichi Hara, one of the few senior survivors, later wrote, "The attack was like nothing we had ever imagined. The B-25 seemed to cut our ships in half. The concentrated firepower of the E. B-25 Straffers delivers not only physical destruction but also a deep, psychological shock to the Imperial Japanese." Davy. As news of the convoy's annihilation spreads, officers who once dismissed American air power are forced to admit that their defenses are now obsolete. Each B-25 carries 8 50 caliber machine guns in its nose, more forward-firing weapons than most destroyers possess. Unlike ship-mounted guns, these can be directed quickly and flexibly from the air. Japanese naval doctrine, centered on surface engagements and conventional aerial attacks, offers no defense against these flying gunships capable of wiping out convoys within minutes. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, receives the report of the Bismarck Sea disaster with visible alarm. He quickly realizes that Japan can no longer risk surface ships within range of American aircraft. The Navy's failure to protect even a heavily escorted convoy means resupply to forward bases will soon be impossible, isolating Japanese garrisons in the Solomons and New Guinea. Though Yamamoto orders a review of convoy tactics and anti-aircraft measures, he privately admits there may be no effective counter to the new American strafers. The transformation of the B-25 Mitchell from a standard medium bomber into a low-flying gunship reflects American mechanical ingenuity at its best, innovation born from necessity rather than pre-war theory. Major Paul Pappy Gunn and his crews, working with limited materials under harsh conditions, created an aircraft more effective against ships than most purpose-built attackers. The 8-gun nose soon becomes standard on late-production B-25J models, with North American Aviation integrating these field modifications at the factory. Some versions eventually carry up to 18 forward-firing 50 caliber guns. After the victory at the Bismarck Sea, B-25 strafers spread throughout the Southwest Pacific. The 345th Bombardment Group, known as the Air Apaches, receives them in August 1943 and begins hunting Japanese shipping near New Guinea, their planes marked by menacing shark-mouth designs. The 38th Bombardment Group also converts its fleet, pioneering tactics for nighttime harbor attacks using radar. By late 1943, Japanese commanders concede that moving ships larger than fishing boats in daylight is suicidal within B-25 range. Logistics collapse as Japan relies on submarines and fast destroyers for nighttime resupply, methods that carry only a fraction of a convoy's load. The garrison at Leh, which the March 3rd convoy was meant to reinforce, never receives enough supplies and is evacuated by September 1943, with heavy losses from starvation and disease. Attempts to stop the strafers prove futile. Their speed and low-level attacks make them hard to hit, and heavy anti-aircraft guns are ineffective. Some Japanese pilots resort to ramming tactics in desperation, but the losses continue. By mid-1944, Japan's merchant fleet has lost over 60% of its tonnage, much of it to B-25 strafers and skip-bombing attacks that could destroy ships in minutes. The strafers expand their targets to airfields, using their 8-gun noses to devastate aircraft on the ground. During the August 17-21, 1943 raids on WWII, they destroy more than 170 planes, crippling Japan's 4th Air Army. Japanese pilots recall the terror of seeing B-25s roar in at treetop height, their guns shredding everything before bombs finish the job. At WWII in mid-1944, strafers again proved decisive, attacking Japanese destroyers on June 8th. 10 B-25s from the 17th Reconnaissance Squadron tear apart the destroyer Harusami with armor-piercing incendiary rounds before skip bombs sink her. The attack forces Japan to abandon its reinforcement mission, showing how these aircraft could alter entire campaigns. B-25 crews embrace their role, painting vivid nose art and giving their planes names like Dirty Dora, Pluto, and Hell's Angel. They take pride in flying machines that combine the range of a bomber with firepower greater than most fighters. Each sinking means fewer supplies for Japanese troops. Survivors of these attacks carry deep psychological scars. Lieutenant Hiroshi Yamamoto recalls nightmares of 8 eyes of death. Commander Toshio Abe reports that his men freeze in fear at the sound of aircraft engines. The B-25 strafers' success forces sweeping changes in Japanese strategy. By late 1943, daylight naval operations become nearly impossible. The Tokyo Express destroyer runs to Guadalcanal. Our one desperate response to speed, and darkness replacing protection, but even these suffer. Losses once radar-equipped B-25s begin hunting at night. By early 1944, Japanese reports call the B-25 Strafe the most feared weapon in the Pacific, more lethal than submarines, more accurate than dive bombers, and more flexible than torpedo planes. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome admits there is no defense against coordinated strafer attacks, recommending all ships stay 500 miles from American airfields, effectively conceding vast areas of the Pacific. Australian airmen also play a crucial role. RAF's No. 18 Squadron flies B-25 strafers from 1944 onward, attacking Japanese shipping in the Netherlands East Indies with the same 8-gun noses. Their knowledge of local waters makes their strikes particularly effective. B-25 technology evolves rapidly. Later versions feature rockets, improved gun sights, and even 75mm cannons for attacking larger ships. The B-25J-22, the ultimate variant, carries up to 1850 caliber guns positioned around the fuselage, creating a flying arsenal capable of destroying entire convoys. German and Italian observers study the design with fascination, but fail to match its concentrated firepower. The Luftwaffe experiments with arming Junkers Ju-88s for anti-shipping roles, while Italian pilots attempt skip bombing with SM-79s. Yet none achieve B-25 level success. The Strafer's influence extends far beyond World War II. Its design inspires later American gunships like the AC-47 Spooky and AC-130 Spectre, aircraft that trace their lineage directly to Pappy Gunn's workshop in Australia. Post-war Japanese historians call the B-25 Strafer one of the Pacific War's defining innovations, on par with radar and code-breaking. Professor Masanori of Japan's Defense University writes that it destroyed not only Japan's ships, but also its naval strategy, forcing an early end to offensive operations. Individual missions become legendary. In November 1943, 7 B-25 strafers attack Simpson Harbor at Rabaul, turning the anchorage into a firestorm within minutes. Mechanics too perfect the conversion process. By late 1943, they can refit a B-25 into a strafer within a week. They refine gun harmonization, ammunition feeds, and bomb release angles. learning that attacking at a slight angle improves accuracy while avoiding heavy anti-aircraft fire. Despite Japan's desperate countermeasures, extra light guns, erratic ship maneuvers, radar-guided defenses, B-25s remain dominant. Maintenance crews work tirelessly in tropical conditions to keep the guns clean and engines running. Intelligence networks of coast watchers and submarines guide the strafers to their targets, leaving no Japanese vessel safe within 500 miles of American airfields. But the cost is high. Low-level attacks are dangerous and many crews are lost. The third attack group alone loses over 40 B-25s. Pilots endure extreme stress from flying straight into gunfire and often suffer psychological exhaustion. Yet their success transforms U.S. air doctrine. The Strafer program proves that innovative field modifications can outperform purpose-built weapons. Leaders like General George Kenney, who encouraged such experimentation, play a vital role in America's Pacific victories. Japanese survivors describe the B-25 as terrifyingly impersonal, a flying machine gun nest that turned destruction into an efficient process. By 1945, the aircraft is used for coastal defense suppression, train attacks, and harbor raids. Plans are made for massive pre-invasion sweeps of Japanese ports, though Japan's surrender makes them unnecessary. Still, the B-25's legacy continues through aircraft like the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a direct descendant of the Strafer concept. Veterans remember their missions vividly: the smell of gunpowder, the vibration of 8 guns firing, the sight of enemy ships breaking apart. Their aircraft, created from improvisation and determination, became one of the most effective weapons of the war. Post-war analyses by Japanese commanders agree the B-25 Strafer, alongside radar and code breaking, helped end Japan's empire by crippling its ability to move by sea. Admiral Somu Toyoda put it simply: the 8-gun B-25 destroyed our ability to move, and Japan could not survive without it. Each 50-caliber gun weighed 64 pounds, fired 850 rounds per minute, and required complex feeds for continuous fire. Together, 8 guns weighed over 500 pounds, firing up to 3,200 rounds, enough for 30 seconds of sustained destruction. Though built from necessity, the B-25 Strafer embodied America's wartime philosophy: adapt fast, innovate boldly, and trust those in combat. What began as an improvised modification became one of the most successful field innovations in aviation history, transforming a medium bomber into a ship-killing monster and changing the course of the Pacific War